So, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us to our November PowerShell user group meetup about PowerShell and GitHub Actions. Just a little bit of introductions who I am. So I'm Konstantin. I'm a consultant, and I like PowerShell very much. I work for this company. You can also reach me on Twitter at my handles. The first handle is mine, and the second handle is the handle of the user group. And if you want to chat or get connected, also use LinkedIn or Xing or so on. Some housekeeping before we start. Session will be recorded, so I hope that I will get the YouTube video available next week. I hope so. So please mute your mic during the session. If you have questions, I think Chrissy don't mind if we unmute and ask. I think
it's true. That's
totally
better
okay.
than the chat. It's hard for me to read the chat, so
yeah,
unmuting and asking will be great.
I will keep an eye on the chat, and let's make that session interactive. I think that's a good thing. Yeah, and today's speaker, Chrissy Lemaire or Chrissy Lemaire. I learned. I think she will introduce herself. I think. Sure. So let's start. And thank you for being here, Chrissy. So
hey, thank you for having me. Gonna go ahead, do that. Screen one and share. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, excellent. We can see it.
Okay. All right, so today I'm going to talk about GitHub Actions and PowerShell, and this is really going to be divided into two parts. The first one, I'm going to talk about something called workflows. I'm going to have a little demo with that. And then afterwards, I'm going to talk about creating your own reusable workflows, aka a GitHub action using PowerShell. In the old days, it used to be that you had to use TypeScript, and I never wanted to get around to learning TypeScript, although I did. But before I did, I was really excited that GitHub actually released the ability to use PowerShell and Bash to create actions, and so I'll be showing you that today. All right, so my name is Chrissy Lemaire, and I'm a dual Microsoft MVP awarded for my work in both PowerShell and SQL Server. I love SQL Server, I love PowerShell. And I'm also a GitHub star, which is essentially an MVP of GitHub.com. You can find me on Twitter. I am @CL. If you have any questions, you can also message Justin W. Grody if you have any advanced questions about GitHub Actions. So again, today I'm going to be talking about GitHub Actions, and this is the platform to automate organizational and developer workflows. As I was going through this, it's taken me some time to really understand, use GitHub Actions, and I always like to really reduce that, make it easy, make it a 101. But I do find that since it's such a vast topic, that's a challenge for me. So to explain GitHub Actions, I'm first going to give you the GitHub's formal definition of it, and then I'll tell you how I got involved with GitHub Actions. So GitHub Actions is an API for cause and effect on GitHub. It allows you to orchestrate any workflow based on any event. While GitHub actually manages the execution, it provides some really nice feedback, and it secures every step along the way. And with GitHub Actions, workflows and steps, it's just code. It's just some YAML, which is really cool. You can store it in your repository, and then you can create, share, reuse, and fork your entire software development practices. Now, the way that I got involved with it was with dbatools. Initially, we started doing pester tests against real live SQL Server instances, and we did that on appveyor.com. But whenever GitHub Actions came out, I like all my stuff to be in one centralized place, and I really wanted to get into it, but I just didn't get around to it until my friend Sander Stodd, he messaged me and he's like, oh my God, this was so easy. Just created a file and I spun up a SQL Server container, and then I did all of my tests there. And so I was like, oh, I want to see. So I went and I looked at his code, and from there I started doing it with my own repository. Specifically, at the time, I was working with Inn-Tools, which is it's a vulnerability analysis scanner, and it has a nice little REST API. So I was building Inn-Tools, which is a PowerShell module, and I looked it up, and there was a Docker container for Inn-Tools. So I started using that, testing with that in my my workflow, and it worked. And I was super excited. And ever since then, like just over the course of time, I was able to better understand, use GitHub Actions, and now just use it across all of my repositories, which are very PowerShell centric. So this is essentially what an action looks like. It's a YAML file, and we'll just go step by step. This is an entire complete workflow. So we'll go step by step, and I hope that this kind of makes it easy and approachable for you, because this is something similar to what I saw when I looked at Sander's code, and I was like, oh, I could totally do that. So the first one is the name. This will appear on the GitHub website. And then on is, it executes against, in this case, it's a push. So if you push a change to your repository, or if you create a pull request. The next one, this was actually suggested to me by Tyler Lionheart. I think that's how you say his last name. He was the VS Code developer on the PowerShell team for a while. And before I was like typing shell push over and over again, and he said, hey, just put that in your default. So in this case, I set a default that every time that you run, just by default, instead of using bash, which is GitHub's default, just use PowerShell. The next one is jobs. So we're going to have a couple jobs here, just one, named run tests. And with runs on, I specified Ubuntu latest. You could pick from a number of Ubuntu runners. You could pick from a number of Windows runners and Mac OS runners as well. Next, a lot of this, by the way, is just like copy paste. I always start with the same copy paste in the beginning. We have uses, actions, checkout. I tried to remove this because I was like, well, I'm not using any of my files, so why do I have to even check out my repository? And then everything broke, so just leave that there. Next up, I actually start up a Docker container for Nessus. So I just got onto the web. I'm familiar with Docker. It's part of my workflow. And I ran this from my PowerShell command line. And then I was like, hey, I could just throw it into an action. So this is a Docker run command that will start up a Nessus Docker container and expose port 8834 that my PowerShell module will then be able to interact with. Next, I wanted to just kind of demonstrate how easy it is to write from secrets. So you can add some secrets to github.com, and we'll do that. And if I forget that step, please do remind me. I'll go and I'll add a secret. And then you add it. You see that env? You're probably familiar with that. If you're a PowerShell developer, you just do like $env. So we name it in license, and then we take it from the secrets, and I named it something slightly different. I just called it license. And in this case, I do env in license, and then I pipe that and I write it to disk using set content. Next up, we go to town with PowerShell. So we'll import Inn-Tools, and then we'll test connecting to the container. We'll run some integration tests, and then if any fail, then it'll actually fail my entire workflow. So let's go line by line. The first one is, well, so you see that run, and then there's a pipe there. That in YAML actually says, I'm about to type out a whole bunch of commands. It's not, don't expect just one line. Like we see here with the Docker run, it's all in one line. But over here, you have this pipe, and then you could just paste in your PowerShell code. So we have import module. Then tintools.psd1. Now tintools.psd1 is in my root. So that's like the home directory of the workflow, even though the workflow can be stored in like the workflows directory, but this, whenever it calls things out, that's its PWD. Its PWD is the root of the repo. Next, we have a little splat, and then we connect to the service, and then we'll run our pester tests. And this is just essentially, it checks to see if any aren't marked as passed. If there are any that are anything else, like failed, it will throw, and then that'll be a little red X, and I'll know that something went wrong with my most recent push or within the pull request process. And this is essentially what it looks like. Whenever you create this file, and we'll be doing that in the demo, when you create the file, you go to the Actions tab, and then it will run through. In this case, with tintools, it's going to go out and it'll do essentially what you just saw, but it's going to do a couple things more because I like to be super complete. So like I set up a CA because I wanted it to be like HTTPS and look good. And it does a bunch of those steps. And what was really cool is that I was able to put this into my entire workflow. It did take me about 500 times, by the way. So if you find yourself like frustrated, I think it's super fun. It's like my zen. I don't really care how many commits that it takes ultimately to run. And sometimes I want it to take a little longer because I enjoy it so much. And it's fun just like exploring, doing all of this. So let's go ahead and look at what it looks like. So on my end, I push that commit that replaces the dinosaur with the lock. This was a real commit. I put the dinosaur because I didn't know what else to put there. And then when I remembered later, I was like, oh, lock is much better. So this part is just GitHub setting up the job. It's running that checkout. It's logging into GitHub's container repository. I did that to speed it up. And now it is starting up the container. We still have like it's the Nessus container. It's writing that certificate. It's trusting the CA. Now it's going out to the PowerShell gallery and it's installing the required modules. It actually skipped that because I cached it, but we'll go over that later. Now it's going to initialize the Nessus server. This is part of my module explicitly. So it initializes the Nessus server with the administrator, user, and license, which was taken from secrets. Now it's running my pester tests. You'll notice that there's error API is not available. Sometimes I do see issues with the containers, but it's rare. With those, I just skip in pester. But what's really awesome about this is that I know that replacing the dinosaur with the lock caused no problems to my module, so everything is still working as expected because I wrote those 26 pester tests. All right, so we just saw the use case for testing new commits so that you can rest easy knowing that changes proposed to your PR won't break your project. I mean, whenever dbatools first came out and I didn't have CI/CD and I wasn't using pester, I kind of just relied on people that were available to test the commands, and I would test it in my own lab. And it's just so nice that now all of that is done for us using pester, GitHub Actions, and AppBear until I find the time to move away from that. Another one is automating the tedious tasks like documentation and release notes updates. When I first created this presentation, I was just saying this line, but I hadn't actually done it for dbatools. And then I took a day to do all of this, to generate my documentation, to generate my release notes based off of PRs. And I had a blast, and now it's available. I put it in my own repo. This is something that we'll be looking at during the demo, so you are free to copy paste. Another one is building projects against Linux, Windows, and macOS. Because these three operating systems are available, whenever you're building your cross-platform PowerShell modules, you can very easily run tests against all three different types of operating systems. Another thing, if you're a .NET developer and you want to test against the nightly changes against .NET, that's something that you're able to do. Probably set that on a schedule. Also, checking your code for passwords and vulnerabilities. There's actually something on github.com called Dependabot. And whenever I was creating my TypeScript project, I wrote 2 Visual Studio Code extensions, and that required TypeScript. And there's always so many dependencies with that, and some of them have vulnerabilities. So it's actually awesome. Dependabot will come in and create PRs that say, you know, you can upgrade to this new version for your dependency that isn't vulnerable and it shouldn't cause any problems. And you can just merge that right on in. It's super nice. Another thing that you could do is check to ensure that your project stays compliant with required regulations. So you can integrate that if you have any industry-specific regulations that you need to follow and there's something available to perform those tests, you can make it automated. Also, I have a module called KB Update that does screen scrapes. How many of y'all do screen scrapes? So fun, right? I mean, it feels like the 90s all over again, but it was scraping the Windows catalog. And for so long, I was actually scraping that from a VM, but then one day I logged into Azure and I had used way too much money. And so I just like hurried up and I deleted my VM. And with that, I deleted my scheduled task that goes and performs that scrape and updates my database. But if I had done that in GitHub Actions, I wouldn't have this problem because it's free and it doesn't rely, you know, it's there, it's in my repository. I could refer to it later. So that broke my heart. Another one is, you know, it could be fun and games. It doesn't just have to be enterprise work stuff. You can schedule and publish blog posts and tweets. I actually use it to filter out my Twitter because I have my name. It's very short, and a lot of times I get a lot of spam, and so I use PowerShell and Bluebird PS, or I think PS Bluebird, something like that. It's by Dave Carroll. It's a Twitter module, and I use that in GitHub Actions to just go through everything and clean up my tweets or my mentions. Next, another one that I thought was cool is Stefan Stranger of the Netherlands. He said that he uses GitHub Actions to enable network admins to keep up-to-date records of IP assignments and available addresses used to configure Azure virtual networks. And so earlier I had talked about how you can run a workflow against any event, any GitHub event, and this is a pretty exhaustive list of those events. So far, initially you saw that it was just like push and pull. But since then, since I first created that, that was like what I started off with, right? So I like to start off small and then grow over the course of time. And since then, I've used schedule, I've used workflow dispatch, I've used repository dispatch, which is pretty cool. Like the reason that I was using it is I said, anytime that there's a change made to dbatools master, go ahead and go to this other repository and execute it. But it got kind of confusing, so I ended up just removing that entirely. But there's all of this that's available for you to do and use, and it makes it real powerful. So support and runners. We had talked earlier again about Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. These actions can run against all of those. They can run against containers, and also if you have a little Raspberry Pi, you can actually self-host a little ARM runner. PowerShell works on ARM, SQL Server works on ARM, and that's totally on my to-do list, but I haven't done it yet, but it is totally possible. GitHub Runner supports PowerShell and a whole bunch of other stuff too. Node, Python, Java, Ruby, PHP, Go. I actually tested to see if it worked with Fortran and COBOL. And last I checked, there was an action for COBOL, which totally blew my mind, but Fortran not yet. But all of these possibilities are supported within the runners. So I know what you're thinking, man, that's a lot of power. How much am I going to be paying? And this, I literally had to ask the GitHub rep that I was talking to, hey, I'm doing a presentation. Is this true that for public repositories, no matter how much time I use, it's totally free? And he's like, yep, totally free for public repositories. But if you create a private repo, then that's where the limitations come in. So for instance, if you have a free account, but you create a little private repo, you'll have 500 megs to work with in your runner. And then you have 2000 Linux minutes per month. So that's like the baseline minute. This isn't an official term from GitHub. It's what I call it, because so like it's the baseline minute, right? And then like Windows minutes takes like 2 Linux minutes, and then Mac OS takes like 8 or something like that. So 2000, I would say that with each of my runs, they probably take about 6 minutes each. So this is pretty significant. If you go over that free tier, if you go over this amount that's already included with a private repo, then you are going to pay a per minute rate with a private repo. Again, totally free. For public, with the operating system, we have that Linux minute, right? So that's super cheap. Mac OS is a whopping 8 cents per minute. And then Windows is like half of that, and it's far cheaper. All right, so now we're actually going to see a demo, and we're going to figure out how to hit escape in Bastion and make it work. Or maybe that's why I have it set up like this anyway. All right. Hey, it worked. Excellent. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to show you some, let me go here. I'm going to show you some of the ways that I use GitHub Actions currently, and then we're going to build an action workflow together. Do we have any questions so far? Nothing. All right. Very thorough introduction. What I would like to do, this is not set up properly, or it's for later. It's no big deal. I'm going to show you a couple of the ways that I use GitHub Actions. So the first one, I will show you my first GitHub action. The first one that I ever wrote, I wanted to ensure that dbatools would just actually load on Linux and Mac and Windows with every single one of the commits, because we have AppVeyor, and AppVeyor does a whole bunch of stuff against a whole bunch of SQL Server instances on Windows. So if everything passed there, I could guarantee that any change that was made to our code base would work on Windows, but I couldn't do it on Linux or Mac OS until this came out. So I created something called a matrix, and I just copy and pasted from Tyler's code. If we go here.
So Chrissy, just one question. So
yeah.
If we create the workflow files, so the YAML files, does the folder structure that you showed here, does it always has to be the folder .github and then the workflows folder and so? Okay.
Yeah, and whenever we create our test, I had that set up too. I'm so bummed. Whenever we create our test workflow, I'll create those folders as well.
Okay.
So we go in here to .github and then workflows. If you put any YAML file in here, probably any, it probably has to follow the right format, then it's going to run it. So with every single commit to our repository, it will run probably all of these, maybe not valid yet. It even does that. So if somebody submits a pull request, it'll make sure, this is awesome. I didn't even know this until I looked at it today as I was preparing. Anytime that somebody creates a pull request, because we try to be a very welcoming community and show people how to use GitHub, a lot of times they'll create the pull request against main or master, because that makes sense. That's what I would do whenever I first start out. But in our case, we actually create our pull request against development. So this one actually tests to make sure that the pull request was created against development. And something that I love about working with the community is that I didn't even realize this. I probably saw it when it was created 2020, not, 2020 and all of 2021. I don't even remember any of it, but I do look at every single commit for this. So it's just awesome that somebody came in and did this. But the one that I had created initially was this cross-platform import, and I wasn't really concerned at the time about running a bunch of commands against a bunch of live SQL Server instances on Linux and Mac. I just wanted to make sure that it loaded, and so far this has come in handy one time that somebody made a change I would have never guessed broke Linux and Windows support, and this test failed, so we knew that we had to go back and fix that. All right, so we'll go through here. So this one, the name is cross-platform import, and it's anytime that somebody performs a pull request. So they can be like typing and committing, and the push won't trigger it, but once they do that pull request, then it will. Next, whenever I was first doing this, I was like, build. I thought that it was a required word, but this is just the name that we gave this job. So. But we formally name it module imports, or this particular step, module imports on all platforms. And then we have runs on matrix OS, matrix.os, and we create that variable down here. Every single time that I create one of these that works against all three, I will come to the dbatools repo and open up ci.yaml and then just copy all of this content. So you could just hit copy right here and then paste that and work from there. I will never remember how to do this. Next, the steps. So we check out our repo, and then we actually perform the import using PowerShell. And you can see here, it imports the module from the root, the PSD1, and we tell it error action stop. So if it can't do it, then it'll actually throw an error. And then once it runs, or once it loads, I do have it run one command that I knew at the time would work without a SQL Server instance, and it would work against all three of the operating systems. So this was my very first CI. Since then, I've grown, and but this one, we're still using it, and it's still very useful. From there, let's see some of the ones that'll be fun. Earlier, I was talking to somebody, one of the organizers for this event, and he said that he was looking to do a release. So I think that I'm going to go to github.com/potato-quality/releases and show you my release. This is the workflow that I created to publish dbatools. So I'll just load it up right here, but then I would like to show you the action. This is an action that just, it ran 1 hour ago. I published it. So I wanted it to be a little bit cleaner. So I made a little edit. Now it's nice and tight. All right. So with my releaser, what I check to do, or what I check is anytime that this runs, and it actually is a manual run. It's not run if somebody does a push. It's not run if somebody does a pull request. It's only run when I tell it to. And so, but let's say that I accidentally executed it and nothing has happened since, right? I don't want kind of a duplicate version of dbatools. So the first thing that it does is it checks to see if any pull requests have been merged since the last release. If it finds that there are at least one PR, then it'll clone the dbatools repository. And the reason that I have to clone it is because this is my own personal repository. It's not the dbatools repo. So I go and I grab that whole repo. I install, oh man, in Cache Helper, this was one of the things that I updated, but it's supposed to say install in cache. Oh, helper PowerShell modules. That's what it is. So it's proper. It just doesn't flow. Next, I update the version of dbatools, and this is done automatically. Then from there, I prep, sign, and publish. So the way that I prep it is that I copy it into like another like clean directory so that I can publish it from there. Because if you publish directly from your repo whenever you're creating a PowerShell module, it'll actually, at least the last time that I did it by accident, it copied over all of my Git files. So now I just do it in a clean, dedicated directory. So I sign it because we have a what's it called, a code signing certificate that's paid for by the community, thankfully, because they're very expensive. It's like $300, but that verifies that dbatools, we certify like this is our module, and that helps it run on more enterprise places. And once it's published out to the dbatools repo, it'll take that updated version and it'll commit it to the dbatools repo. Sorry, once it's published to the PowerShell gallery, it will commit that change to the dbatools repo. It'll create a release in GitHub, and then we also rebuild our docs. So for us, we have a very intricate system that rebuilds our documentation each time. And the reason that we needed our own documentation was, at the time, it was actually really hard to like figure out, read the docs. I just couldn't get it to work. But also we have a lot of extra stuff that we want to include for the community that it's automatically done by our docs. So, you can have this where it will give more exposure to our contributors. And we have things like availability, because not like about 75% of our commands run on Linux and Mac. So we wanted to make that easily available. And this is all stuff that's in our notes. And I don't think that read the doc supports like these advanced things that we want. But what I do is I use this workflow to do all of this for me. And so now that you have an idea of what's happening, we will go and we will look at it in detail. So what I say is on workflow dispatch, and I have a function that will do this from my computer. All I have to do is type publish dbatools, and it will dispatch this workflow. In this case, I actually run it on Windows, and the reason is because of that code signing certificate that is not supported in Linux. Maybe I could do it with OpenSSL, but why would I if there's a Windows runner that's available and I could just do it there? So for the defaults, the working directory I set to dbatools, and with my shell, I use PowerShell. I'm not sure why I chose PowerShell over push, but we'll probably see later on in the code. So you can see here that it runs on Windows latest. And then I actually use the GitHub CLI, which really simplifies working with things like releases. I'm not good with the Git command line tool at all, but GitHub's CLI is so much more straightforward and easy to use, and I do use that in my workflows. But in order to do that, you do have to have a personal access token. So I just added this to my environment and it picks it up automatically. So you remember whenever we saw check to see if any PRs have merged since the last release? This is what it's doing. It's pretty cool. So we have this GH release, and then I specify the repo, and I put it in a format that PowerShell can use. So I use convert from JSON, and I get the created date for the last release. And then next, I'll look to see if any pull requests have been created since that last release. Next up, if there are any new PRs, this is setting a variable in, it's kind of hard to explain, but you basically have to communicate between steps, is my knowledge or my understanding at this time. To communicate between steps, you do have to like set a variable. So what I say is I set the output to new PR and then true if there are any new PRs. And then I was really proud of this. And then I export the CLI XML, the PowerShell XML, so that I can use it later. If not, then it's set to false. So if there haven't been any new PRs, and then every single thing down here is just going to skip. It would be really cool if I could, like, if you could just say right here, you know, if there are any new PRs, keep going. But with each of these steps, you do have to say it over and over and over again. With this one, I haven't created that dbatools directory just yet. So I told it that the working directory is C, and then I run the GH repo clone, and that uses my pat. I love GH. This one was just, it was a lot of fun. But I do want to take a step back and explain why I didn't put this into the dbatools repository. And the reason is because when you have a secret, all of your developers that have contribute rights could say echo secret and like send it to some other web server, and then they could look at it, right? And whenever you have a code signing certificate, that thing has to be protected at pretty much all costs. In our organization, even though we have 216 contributors to the dbatools project, there are only 4 of us that have the code signing cert. So I didn't want to put it on the dbatools repo where 65 people have contribute rights. So I created this entirely on my own repository, and I'm the only person that can extract those secrets. So that's why it's here, and that's why I'm having to do things like check out this remote repository. And that is why I explored the repository dispatch hook earlier, but I decided against it, and I just used the GH CLI. The GH CLI, by the way, is different from the Git CLI. Git is for working with Git repositories, whereas GH is for working with GitHub.com. All right, so here we install and cache helper PowerShell module. So I need one module called help out. And this, it separates our commands from our PowerShell help. And so I need to cache that. I could just install dash module help out. The problem with that is sometimes the PowerShell gallery goes down. And also it takes a bit extra time that I may not necessarily want to sit around and wait for. Next up, I will update the version. We've seen this before. There's something called like update PowerShell data file or something, but it rewrites it. And now it's just like, never mind. Interestingly enough, because we have a PowerShell audience, PowerShell and push act differently when you whenever you outfile with push, it uses no BOM, BOM, and our repository decided that we did not want any BOM. I don't really know much about it, but I know that it's important to some people on the team, and so I wanted to accommodate that. And when I was running this, I was wondering why I was like, it was just making like crazy changes to my files, and it's because I needed to use push. So in the future, if you have, you know, a project that uses one or the other that requires BOM, do keep that in mind. So we'll go through, and I can keep going. This is what I like about this is, as a PowerShell person and developer, this is familiar to me, which is why I'd wanted to show it to you as well. And also, everybody needs to prep, sign, and publish. There are easier ways, which I will show you later. So here we have like the NuGet API key, super important not to share. Thank God I didn't have it in my profile whenever we changed to this screen. Here's my certificate. And what I used for this was I actually encoded it using, what's it called? It's not UTF-8. What's the one that we all encode to and from back and forth? Y'all remember? That one. The base 64, that's what it is. Yeah. So I use base 64, and I take my binary PFX file and I change that to base 64. I save that as a string, and then I do some conversions. So here's some more PowerShell. Since y'all are probably PowerShell people, you'll be able to understand this as you walk through it. But the person that I was talking to earlier, he was talking about having to create this. I use Robocopy, and I exclude some things. So whenever I publish to the PowerShell gallery, it's going to omit the .git directory, the .github directory, all our tests, and the VS Code directory. So I hope that this is not easy to understand, but it gives you an idea of how it is that I do it. And then this is where I actually commit it back to the dbatools repository. I thought this was interesting. Look at this. It puts a pat, kind of like the old days whenever you logged into web services with like username at domain.com. And we do something similar there where you can send your secret. So this is also a good like knowledge base for the stuff that you would have to Google. I had a blast Googling all of it. So I don't recommend looking at mine unless you want to save yourself some time. And that's what this one looks like. So now that y'all have an idea of the GitHub Actions workflow, how it is that I use it, we can build one together. Let me go ahead and go to github.com/potato quality/actions test. It's my actions repo. I love GitHub desktop, so we will be using that. Look how easy that is. Clone it. I'm going to change that to, oh, you know what? Maybe I did it on main. Hour ago. There we go. German user group. I'm going to go to repository, open in Visual Studio Code. All right, now let's get started. First thing that we're going to do is look at somebody else's repository. So let's go to dbatools. This one looks good. We could try it against 3 things. Actually, I'm probably, you know what? I don't want to. I want to try it against 1 thing. So let's go ahead and look at another workflow that we can do. What we'll do in this workflow is we will create something that starts up a SQL Server container and installs dbatools and then performs a query. And if it fails, we'll just integrate that with Pester somehow. Sounds like fun?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so probably tests. I always start with something else. Okay, I like this so far. I use Ubuntu latest. I'm using PowerShell. Sometimes I use my tokens, sometimes I don't. All right, so we'll start here. The next thing that we want to do is we could go here to Explorer. And we're going to create a .github directory. And I'm sorry about the how small this is. I can't get it to be any bigger. Even if I zoom, it'll zoom everything but Explorer. And then I think it's workflows plural, workflows. Let me make sure. So this is the path that you want. Yep. And now we're going to go in here and we're going to say test. We're going to say SQL.yaml. Yes. And then open with code. All right. So now we have this. Let me alone. When did they let us start skipping these updates? I thought that was like a paid version. All right. So here we go. What we're going to name it is test a query. Sounds great. It's going to be PowerShell. It's going to run on the latest Ubuntu. We're going to have our token just in case we need it. If not, then we could just delete it from here. Now we want to set up the Docker image. I don't know if it's going to be multiple lines of code. I think that we'll just need 1. So let's Google. SQL Server container Docker. So this just sort of shows that you know the things that you would do in your PowerShell console or in VS Code, you just take that and you throw it into a YAML file. So if you were a PowerShell or a SQL Server developer, you'd be doing this, and we'll do it there. All right, this looks reasonable. I don't know. I don't like it. I'm suspicious. I think that we have to do the other one. There we go. Quick start. I like this. This is much better. Oh, look, I have a little copy button. Maybe I will do that. Maybe I'll put that pipe back. And then you need to do 1, 2. It'll tell you if you don't do it right, but you always just like skip 2. All right, so this is going to pull a Docker container and run it. Oh, sorry. It's just going to pull the Docker container. What's up, Joseph? That's just pulling it, and now we're going to run it with some default values. All right, we'll name it SQL1. That looks good. That looks good. I like this password. That's great. Should be hard enough for it to start. This looks like a good start so far. I don't know if we need sudo. Let's take that off. All right. Now we're going to save it. And because we're doing a push and we're going to push this change to the repository, it's going to initiate that action to begin. So we're going to create SQL.yaml. Current branch, German user group. Sweet. Awesome. I like to do everything from here. So we will view this on GitHub. What up? I don't need to see that change. We're just going to go to this action. My Twitter thing messed up for a while. So it's just like 3 months of messed up Twitter requests. Remember we named it tests? Some people use this a lot prettier, but I don't. This is test a query and then tests right there. So that lines up. And then test a query is, should be on the side here. Maybe not. No, it's that one. I don't know where test a query comes in. Awesome. It worked. At least it looks like it did. Let's go ahead and take a look. So this looks familiar. Does everybody here use Docker? I love it. I only see one.
I use it for testing. So
awesome. Yeah. Excellent. All right. So now our Docker container is working. And we are going to want to install. So let's go ahead and do. What you're seeing here, by the way, is GitHub Copilot. And sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not as great. Let's see what it wants us to do. Nothing yet. Okay. Let's see. Set up Docker images and now install dbatools. We're going to run. Ah, nice. Nice try. Almost. Let's do it anyway. That could have been useful. But what we're going to do instead, our default is push. So we will set PS repository named dbatool. Well, you know what? I don't know. PS gallery trusted. You remember how we do this? Set PS repository. No.
Installation policy trusted, I think.
Hey, thank you. That sounds very much like it. Installation policy trusted. Initially, whenever I did this, I skipped this part and then everything bombed out. So it is, oh, nice. It is required each time. because it's not trusted by default. It would be nice. I mean, it's a runner. Why not? But install module dbatools force. I don't really need force, but I like it. That was a good suggestion. Let's see if this works. It should take like 1 minute. Add dbatools. Is everybody following so far? Does this make it more approachable? This is good stuff. I love it. So we have that there, and we go here.
So I have one question.
Yep.
Are there any extensions for writing GitHub Actions in VS Code?
Okay, so by default it's linted, and I don't know how, but I think that that's really awesome. As far as writing, I don't know, but I know interacting with GitHub Actions, there's an extension so you can like watch it execute instead of coming here to the web page. You can see it execute inside of your VS Code. And whenever Justin Grody first told me that, I was really excited. But what I found was that it was I had to sit there and like press refresh in order to get it to like show up on the side. So I just ended up abandoning it.
Okay.
And now I'm back to my web page. It's also, I don't know, like I like the web. It's part of my workflow. I did try to get VS Code to be part of my workflow, but it didn't do it so much.
I was just asking because I saw you using that with Justin Grody on the talk.
Yeah, I was using it, and then I was like, nah. I felt like I had to like babysit it. I really wanted it to just like hang out and do its thing. Maybe that's changed since then, though. We have like 2 for 2, which I'm pretty excited about. This actually worked, and dbatools is installed. So you can see, run Docker, installs some of your modules. Next up, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna copy paste this. I don't have to mess with formatting. We are going to query query. Maybe I will tell GitHub Copilot what I want in detail, and it'll help me. Okay, query SQL container using SA password, and you know what? Sure, SQL CMD. Okay, so then I'm gonna come here. That's a problem. Okay, what if I actually say encode password from plain text? Watch it. Oh, yeah. Oh my God. Thank goodness. Because I was going to have to go look this up. I love this. That was awesome. Okay. Yeah. Oh my God. I felt like GitHub Actions, I was talking to a developer and I was like, hey, we should do this and make it easier for people to use this command. He was like, I agree. And I was like, I'll create a PR. And then like whenever I started typing, it knew exactly what I wanted. And I was totally tripped out. This though is super cool because I told it what I wanted. And I'm like struggling, you know, we'd have to look this up where on Google or on Stack Overflow. And so I don't have to do that. All right. So what's wrong? Do I just that? Okay, cool. Awesome. Okay, so string is going to be dbatools.out. God, this is awesome. Love it.
Yeah, so someone mentioned in the chat that escalated quickly. So
it did.
Yeah,
oh my
Copilot
God.
is a really nice thing. So I got the mail finally that I'm also can use Copilot, and it's really cool.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Are you enjoying it?
Yeah.
I love that was awesome. Let's, you know, I don't want to call it password though. Yeah, it is the password, but I'd rather call it like something, whatever. We'll leave it as that. Okay. Yeah, it is. I thought so. When I was like, there's no way that it's watching my chat, but it's insane that it's so predictable. All right, hey, that's exactly what I want to do next, right? I want to connect to SQL Server using invoke DBA query. Oh, hold on. Hey. Oh, close. All right, we're going to do some SQL instance. And then localhost is going to go to port 1433 by default. There's our cred. That'll be SQL credential. And then query select version. So now we're just going to connect, like invoke a query. We aren't going to do a pester test yet. We'll do that afterwards. I like to do this step by step. I hope that it makes it more approachable. Encode password and connect to container. Right, let's go back to actions. Come on, 3 for 3 with some Copilot written code. I love this. Could just like, zen out for a moment.
Yeah, you just hit tab.
Say again?
Yeah, you just hit the tab key.
I did.
Everything
Yeah.
is okay.
Exactly. That was so cool. I actually did. I don't know if y'all do this, but I use that predictive text stuff from the PS read line. I think you add, your history, and you have to hit the right button to make that come out. And I wanted them to match, so I actually changed it from tab to right, and now they match, and I could just flow with it. So one thing you'll notice is that dbatools takes like 18 seconds to install every time. That's a lot faster than I thought it was. Localhost didn't work. Look, it's just sitting there. Ooh. So something's going on that we can't connect to SQL Server. 1433, that's exposed. I am surprised. I might have to look at somebody else's code to figure this out. Let's revisit. Does anybody have any, because it's not that the username and password are failing, it's that it times out after 15 seconds. It's running. I'm going to remove this pull because Docker will do a pull if you do a run. But we have 1433 to 1433. Oh, SQL 1, maybe that shouldn't matter though at all.
It could be the variable cred that you have defined on the different step, but it's not shared.
Yeah, that's right. But I'm pretty sure, no, because the container, and it gives it 15 seconds. So the container runs throughout all of the steps. The thing that I would do to create a whole new container would have to be a different workflow, because that's how I use my Nessus thing. You remember at the top, like I install that web server and I start that up and then I query it down at the bottom, and that's real code. Let's go up here and see what it says. Maybe it says that it was doing the Docker image, but it didn't actually start. Maybe it doesn't like.
Yeah, I think on line 33 you get a GUID. So this.
So it did start. Yeah. So it starts it up. All right. This is actually my favorite part of making actions. So I'm not in any rush to like, oh my God, I don't want to spend like too much time, but so invoke DBA query, we install the module, and not only that, the command, so what is that? Push, we installed it on push, process completed. Is there any additional information here? So another thing could be that it never found DBA tools, so maybe we have to import it. I'm so sorry if somebody said that before and I missed it.
Yeah, other thing could be that you use verbs on your DBA query command.
Say again.
So if you use the verb the dash verbs.
Oh yeah, good call.
Would
Thank
that show
you.
you any information?
It
Is
will. It
Yeah.
shows some good information. Thank you. All right. So I like that we've changed this to run because, well, I guess we'll just see a GUID mostly whenever that happens. This gets installed. We have the credential, local host. I changed that to local. I don't expect this to work, but if it continues to break, I'll really like that idea for the verbose. If it continues to break, then I'm just going to go copy it from one of my workflows that I know works. I reuse this all the time. I think that's the intention. Yeah, because it says you could use it to fork your whole software development process. Trying to fix. Man, we were almost, I guess we're 2 for 3. I promise I won't drag y'all through the 500 commit process. How many commits does it take for you to finish one of your little projects? Anybody?
It depends on the size of the project, but I do most of my work in Azure DevOps at the moment, writing YAML pipelines. I have the same problem as you, that I have to use many commits, so sometimes I misspelled something, or the indentation of YAML isn't right, and so on and so forth.
Totally.
Yeah, that's.
So it's similar.
But it's always a good feeling when everything is green.
Whenever it hits that final green, and then
I can relate to that. So yeah.
Yeah, totally. So you hit that green, and then there's the final step, where you go and you like clean up your README like 57 times, like that. All right. So I'm not sure what's happening. I think that this is it usually has more information. So let's go look at another one that worked.
What is the exit code 139?
I don't know. Exit code 139 GitHub Actions. Looks like something with Docker. I don't know. Ooh, here's I'll look up one more thing. I don't know what Unity is. Oh, that's that game designer.
Yep.
I never had any desire to write a game, even though I love playing them. I would like to make those little sprites though. Like that dude, Mark Duquier. I don't know how to say his last name. I'm guessing that's how you say it. He makes these. He's the Twitter person that makes these little icons.
Oh, okay.
All right. So 139 didn't come up with anything specifically awesome. It did seem like the container started. I could do a Docker run, but I think I'm just going to go look at one of my repos that has some SQL Server interaction. And Azure Write, no. This a download, no. 10 tools, no. Dataverse. Let's see if, because I'm pretty sure I got Dataverse. No! Oh, thank goodness. All right. I got this one working. Whatever.
Okay,
fine.
you do it with SQL CMD. Oh, okay.
Fine. Well, I don't think it's going to work though. Oh, all right. So what I actually did with this was I used something that I built, which was a reusable action, where instead of doing all this Docker stuff, you just actually use an action to install the SQL engine and the SQL package. So I'm just gonna, I'm just gonna copy this. I like it, and then we'll see if it installs it properly. This is another thing that I do too, where I'll build it one way and then build it another. All right, so I don't need SQL package, but we'll do it anyway. And this is Ubuntu latest. I tested it today. We have dbatools. Whoo! I don't like that suggestion. Okay, this should work according to the other code. Try it with an action instead. And then because I do want to end on green, I'll probably just copy and paste that action if this fails. If it works, then I will move on to the portion of the presentation where I talk about creating one of this reusable action, the one that used to be done solely in TypeScript or some other language I don't know. And since August of 2020, they introduced a way to do it using Bash and PowerShell, which is very exciting. So now we will go to actions test and then actions. Sweet. So it looks like the SQL Server is accessible at localhost.
Ah, okay.
Now we're going to get dbatools. No, what is happening? I feel like this is taking too long. Well, the module import probably takes like 5 or 7 seconds, but it feels like it's already been going. Okay. And still with no information. Oh goodness. Okay. So I actually just figured out what it is. The problem is, and maybe this is what the person was saying earlier, is that the credential variable was created on a different step. And so that doesn't persist. And what I've learned from this is that each time that you have this name in this run, it's just like restarting a new PowerShell session. So I love this learning. All right, cool. So we will do this instead. Okay. Okay. This is going to work. It should have told me though that the login had failed. I do wish that it would have, because we have installed the module dbatools and it puts it in the proper path. We don't need to explicitly invoke it here. All right.
Does the password work?
The password, yeah. Let's go look it up. So we'll go to the GitHub Actions Marketplace, and then look up MS SQL. Hey, kitty. So let's see what the password is.
Default is dbatools. I always saw it.
Yeah. So that one has a 0. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right, there we go. Okay, and then this should work. Okay. And I kind of want to do this one too, but I won't. Let's try it. See how this works. Move it all to 1. Okay, and that was actions test. Okay. I don't have a lot of faith in this, but I mean, why both Docker? If this fails, then I'm gonna start to think that there's an issue with the runners, because that action that I created actually has its own workflows that test the action, and its last status was that it works. I actually updated one of my actions today, the README, so that it could be pretty for y'all. And it seems that there was a behavioral change in Mac OS. And so now it's not working in Mac. So I'll just blame it on the runners. Please, 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 please. Y'all do that.
No.
Yes, sweet,
Perfect.
awesome, excellent. Okay, so that's what it was, is that the username and password was failing because each of these steps does launch a new PowerShell session. And that is why you can have the Docker container persist, but the the PowerShell variables will disappear unless you write it to disk. And we had seen it before where I was like, I'm just going to write all of this info to disk and then re-import it at a later step, because I did have to separate the steps. All right, I'm so excited. So I hope that helped clarify for y'all. I'm actually, because it took so long and I didn't expect the troubleshooting portion to take so long. From here, you could just throw in Pester. Pester is actually built in to I think all three of the runners, so you don't even have to install it. The SQL Server module, if you're a SQL Server person, is built into the Windows runner, but not Linux or Mac OS. And from here you could see that code. You invoke your Pester, and then throw in the event that there are any failures. And there's a couple ways to make it have that little X, including putting your variables in a different step. So that is excellent. I'm excited about this. This looks like a good, straightforward, and I would like to, good, we did commit it. Okay. Is that clear for anyone before I move on to the part where we build our own reusable workflow to share with the world? Does anybody have any questions about using a GitHub Actions workflow? All right, so now we're going to talk about building your own reshareable actions. So if you saw whenever I went to the GitHub Actions marketplace, which is similar to like the VS Code extension marketplace, you can see here that people have added some PowerShell actions, and I wanted to be here. I wanted to be part of the action. And I was like, what do I do? And I couldn't think of a reusable process that would be reusable for the world. And I was thinking about it today, and whenever you build that workflow, it's kind of like building a script, whenever you put your variables all at the top and stuff. And I feel like actions are more like a module with, a function where you pass in those parameters. So yeah, it's more reusable. And in this one, we're gonna see. So I'm gonna do something similar with the GitHub Actions. This is GitHub's official description. They said with Composite Actions, which were introduced rather recently in August of 2020, you can now create reusable actions using shell scripts and even mix multiple shell languages in the same action and reuse them for different workflows. So a prime example for that is caching your PowerShell modules. That could be a really long process, or you could just paste in 3 lines and make it super easy. And that's what I did with this. I'm really excited because very recently, I would say within the last 10 days, GitHub actually added some functionality to their runners, to their actions. It's support for composite actions within Composite Actions, and support for the if statement. Both of those things together, it brought my code that people used to have to copy and paste for this action down all the way to just what you see here. So it's just so much more beautiful now. So the basics of Composite Actions, when you're building this action for others to use, you're going to have 3 primary parts. The first part is input, which is very similar to PowerShell's parameters. And the next one is runs, which is just like the body of the code. It's like process. And then the output is like an output object, like whenever you use like a PS custom object and you output that. Now, you don't always need output, but it is very helpful a lot of the times. With the module cacher that I built, currently there is no output needed. It just grabs the stuff. So let's go ahead and look at a demo. And what I'm going to do is walk you through the process of how I came up with creating this action for the world to make it a lot easier. All right, so this was my first pass. Whenever I was starting up, whenever I was using that Docker container with Nessus, so we've seen this before, if you remember. And whenever I went and I installed my PowerShell modules, I needed to install dbatools, I needed to install PS Framework, PowerShell job, and I just had to wait over and over. And whenever you're committing 500 times to build anything, like if you could scrape off a few seconds, it's really helpful. So I was like, oh, I'm just going to cache it. So I looked up actions cache, and I found this cache, this action from GitHub themselves. And with actions, whenever you copy them from the marketplace or when you use them from the marketplace, you'll find that people just give you something that you could copy. I'm not used to this yet. You could just copy and paste into your own stuff. And so I was looking at this and I was like, all right, that looks good. This is a bit intimidating because whenever I was first starting, I don't know what this is. I figured that it was like just some language, right? It turns out that it's the way that YAML talks and uses variables. But yeah, I just copied this, right? And I pasted it. And I did have to decide, okay, so the path, I'm going to have to figure out the PowerShell path. And then I'm going to have to figure out the key. And I'm going to have to do it without hash files because I don't know what all that means. I do now because Justin Brody told me, but at the time I didn't. So this is about what it looked like initially. I pasted that, then I replaced a couple things, right, with the path. Instead of this right here, instead of their home cache and the exclude, so you have this little exclamation point similar to PowerShell. So I was like, first I had to do, I had to show my path. So that was one of the commits, right? Because this took 500 tries. I had to figure out where my path was. And it turns out that it's right here. And I was like, all right, so I need it for PS Framework and I need it for PowerShell job. And then for the key, whatever that hash was, it looked wild. And I like to keep it simple. So I just named it PS module cache. And then I copied and pasted this portion. No, not yet. I went to the usage. This is what I did. Whew, man, I remember this. It actually took me a long time to kind of parse it apart, but it was fun learning it. So I copied this and I was like, oh, that's really cool. This is how it looks whenever you use if. And you actually use YAML and in Azure DevOps. Is it similar with the syntax that you have that if colon and run colon?
I don't use the if colon. I only use it if one passage fails or one step fails, then the whole pipeline stopped. So I only said if the stage before works, then continue.
Oh, cool.
So but if I'm not familiar with, I don't know that, but I have to look it up.
So you don't know if there's similar syntax?
I don't know
this?
that. Yes.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that this was cool. I learned about the if syntax from here, and this is one of the very important things that GitHub recently added to the actions that allowed me to create such a small little action. So I'm going to close this out, even though I might need it later. All right. Okay, so I did this with the PS cache, and then I installed the required PowerShell modules. Initially, as y'all know, I just did this and then it failed. So I had to add this back. And as I was testing this, I did get one success, and then I added on like, hey, if I have to add in dbatools, all right, so I want to add dbatools. I guess I add it here, and then I have to add it here. And I was pretty bummed about that because I'm like, man, this is just more and more stuff. And then from there, I was able to run my pester tests. But as I was trying this over and over, whenever I tested to see if dbatools existed by using get module, it didn't exist. And it's because I had to invalidate that key. So I would have to do like PS module cache 1, and then I would run my commit, and then things weren't working, and then it would work, but I needed to try some new code. So then I would do 2, and I ended up doing like, so it wasn't as pretty as I had wanted it to be. And this is just, it's a lot to expect from a person who just wants their PowerShell cached, their PowerShell modules cached. In the end, ultimately, it turns out that I just had to cache this, just the modules directory, right? This is where it's storing all the things from save module. And from this, I ended up wanting to build it. And this is where I was like, man, you know, I want to save everybody this time that I'm having to put into learning this path, into learning like what this key means. I actually removed the runner OS from the key because I thought that it was ugly. And then somebody used my module on Mac, and they said that it was failing because their repository had that key stored for Linux, but whenever their other VM ran it, it was looking for that cache and it couldn't find it within the Mac cache. So that's why it's important to put this runner OS, because I guess they store in different directories, and this runner OS tells it, it gives it that unique key. And I wanted to build a unique key. I also wanted to automatically figure this part out, whether you're on Windows, whether you're on Linux, whether you're on Mac. I wanted the path to be determined for people. I also didn't want them to have to go through this step of trusting the repository and forgetting to do it. And so that's whenever I was like, I'm going to finally have something to build an action for, and you know, we could save the world. So what I'm going to do, because you're a PowerShell audience, I'm going to paste in this concept that I wrote in PowerShell so that we can understand those parameters that run, process, and then the outputs. So let's see like what type of output GitHub is actually looking for. And then I'll show you this concept.ps1 in a moment. So we are in PowerShell core. So right now, sorry, there's like that big old space. It looked through my whole computer and it found that dbatools already exist. So the only module that is actually needed is posh rs job. And then you can see this key gen. I decided initially that it was just going to be Win32 NT, which is like the operating system. So I kept in that runner OS and then dash each of the modules that are required. It automatically determined the appropriate module path, and then you can't access your, you know how we do PS default? No, that's not the one. PS bound parameters. There's no such thing in GitHub Actions. So what I find is that I have to take that input and put it in the output as well if I want to access it. So this is, for us, this is the concept for us as PowerShell people, right? We have invoke PS module cache. We have this little description, and then the parameter is PS modules to cache. And I really like this. So you can pass in an array, And then we go through and it executes this main.ps1 and we say the type is needed. So which ones are needed? Do I need dbatools? No, it's already installed. Do I need posh rsjob? Yes, because I don't have it installed yet. Next is the unique key generator. And so I just say like the type is the key gen, and then the modules. I do have to keep stating the modules over and over again. And then here's how I find the default module path for the operating system. I just say type module path. And so you can kind of imagine what the main.ps1 is going to look like. And then here's my little output, right? So here are, again, this is the input. Here's the run, and here is the output. So before I keep going, I do want to go to PS module cache and just show you. This is my repository, and it's super simple, and that's what I like. Unlike if you're building a Visual Studio Code extension and you have a billion files just to start, that's kind of intimidating for me. And so I really like building GitHub Actions because it is action.yaml, main.ps1, the README, the license, and then the change log if you want it, if you're like all thorough. So here, yeah, so the moment that you put this action.yaml in your root, you will be given the prompt. How did you get that to the marketplace? The moment that you put that there, you'll be prompted, and then you can just click on that, and there's a little process where it validates to make sure that you have a couple things. And then once you do, it'll appear here. So pay attention to this cute little icon, because that's always something I'm like, man, how did they do that? And it's all in the YAML. So let's go ahead and take a look at that action. Now, this is the first, this is V1. V4 looks a lot different, but it's also far harder to explain. And so I'm just going to show like where it started. So we have this download icon. And dark gray, and then we just see that there's like a standard library that you pick from. That's pretty cool. And then the inputs. So we have modules to cache. That's where the user is actually going to type in dbatools or PS framework, etc. And then next are the outputs, and the outputs are used by the end user if it's needed. And I'll give you an example of a really cool way to see when it's needed, and that's within my action called Azure Write. Azure Write is I think that's, so there's Azure Write. Oh man, I think I'm going to my repository. Let me look here. So Azure Write is it's a storage emulator for Azure, and I wanted to install it. I wanted to make it easy for people to install, but it needs like this long connection string. And here's all the inputs. I was going to use this one, but there's so many inputs that it's like kind of overwhelming, right? So here's all of the parameters. And then the output is connection string, and the way that the user can use it is by just copying this example workflow. And we could see here, so like this, we could copy that. I won't use it, but I like it. We could see here that the connection string, here's PowerShell, we say connection string, and then here's the steps.azurewrite.outputs.constring. So we could see this ID is going to output something, and it'll be constring. And how do you know that? It's because I documented it up here so you could play with the outputs. In this case, the output is going to be like we saw in that little sample PowerShell command. We have the module path is going to be there. We're going to have the key gen that'll also be output, the needed and the modules to cache. And so that's the output. Now we're going to talk about the runs. And the run also uses some really funky YAML syntax. And my suggestion is, if you're not familiar with the way that like GitHub Actions does this, just copy and paste it and replace until it works. That's what I did. So essentially, what I'm about to show you is going to run this. So we'll just run it. No, that just copied something else. Let me go back here. So needed, I don't have az.sql and I don't have az.storage on my computer. I do have dbatools, so that is not needed. So this is what GitHub is going to see and what it's going to need. Then I'm going to say keygen. So there we go. Those are the two things that I needed, and they're just separated by a dash. And then the module path. So it takes this, and how do the GitHub actions like understand it? We use this set output, and this is where I copy pasted until it worked. Initially I started with a bash action, and then I just like made it work with PowerShell. So it's just the set output name needed, keygen, and module path. In my Azurite GitHub action, this was set output name equals constring or connection string, and then I output the connection string there. So we have the GitHub action path, and you have to have this. I actually took it out to make it just a little bit nicer looking, but then it tried to execute in the directory of the repository using the action instead of the action repository. So we can see here, we execute this main.ps1 type needed, and then the inputs modules to cache. So it executes needed, it executes this essentially. And then we have the keygen and the module path. Is that making sense so far? So this is an entire action. This has the description, it has the inputs, it has the outputs, and it has the runs. And if it doesn't make sense yet, just copy paste. Go on.
So everything you write to write output will be outputted by the action. Is that correct? So,
yes, but
okay.
it'll be output in this way. So
okay.
Right. So then the person will be able to use it, and I'll show it probably. Did I do it in this final.yaml? I was like, why am I using this final.yaml? Is that, yeah. So this is the needed. Remember that? So I have install module and then steps PS module cache, which is this step right here, outputs and needed. So it only installs the ones that are needed. So this is how you use an output. This is the end user. With the final.yaml, this is the person that is using the action that you create and put out into the marketplace. So that's this one right here. So it outputs needed like that, and then they can use it later. I could show my keygen if I wanted, and actually that's what it should be here. Oh, awesome, I did it. Okay, so this is the final one, right? So instead of having to figure out the path and put it in, and like typing it in manually, I use the output of the module path. And same here for the key. Instead of coming up with my own key and changing it every single time that I need to test something, then it just uses this output instead. And then if you're interested, I think that the main.ps1 is the least interesting of all this because we all know PowerShell already. But you don't put like function name at the top. You just start with your parameter and you call it from command line like the old days before modules. And so this is just some classic PowerShell, how it is that I created the needed list. I do have to use get module list available because I don't like it because it's so slow. It takes like 4 seconds, but that was, of all the ways that I tested, this was the most surefire way to ensure that it wasn't available. And I thought that it was a good trade-off to make sure that I was doing it the proper way. Because I could do like ls and then do the path, but what if they put it somewhere else or something? I don't know. So yeah, here's the module path. It outputs it one, this is very specific for 132, and then everything else is this path. And so we'll go to the final. Y'all remember the Docker container, setting up Nessus, and then we go here. Remember that copy paste that we did from GitHub's actions? We're just doing it over again. So this right here, it gives me all the outputs that I'm looking for, because it looks about just as long. So you might be like, Chrissy, like, what does this really save me? It's a lot of lines. But I did have this just available to copy and paste. And people just had to change this line, and I took care of everything else after that. Now, since then, because of the changes that were introduced, now when you go and you look at PS module cache, so PS module cache, am I not searching it right? I feel like there's a better way to search the marketplace that I'm not finding. No, all right. Nowadays, with version 4, this is all that you have to do. But behind the scenes, I am actually performing all these steps for the user. So they just pass this little section, and they change this to V4. Now, I really like that if you are building, or when you are building your own GitHub action using PowerShell, and you're in a test branch called like new action test, that's how you call that branch instead of V4. V1 is a formal release. It's a GitHub release that once I was happy with the output, then I created that release and I could reference it. And then I make sure, like in my test, that V2 continues to work. And it will, because I didn't delete that GitHub release. So, but you could just do this if you create a test branch, and it'll execute against your action.yaml and your main.ps1. I just named it main.ps1. I saw another person, they named theirs, what was it? Action.ps1. And I thought that was a great idea. And that's probably what I should have done. It's not a big deal. All I would do if I were to rename this file is I would change it right here. So I would just say action.ps1, action.ps1. So you can name it whatever you would like, and you could do as much PowerShell as you would like. So yeah, this would be the final with the outputs. So we have our inputs, modules to cache. We have our outputs, which are these, the module path, the key gen, and the needed. And that is ultimately how people will use your PowerShell GitHub action. I also have some other actions. Let's go take a look at, these are the ones that mention PowerShell specifically. So we have about, 15. And people have different ways to publish. I did want to use PC Geek 86's module to publish to the gallery, but whenever I had looked, it didn't support signing, and I needed to sign. And also I have like a really specific release process because I do my own like parsing and all of that. And one more that I want to show you, we had seen it earlier. So we have MS SQL, and I have this suite. The reason that I created this was because actions are awesome, and this is a lot of fun. But ensuring that the SQL engine, the SQL client, SQL package, and local DB install properly across all of the different operating systems required a massive amount of code. And so I was like, instead of me just doing this over and over in each of my repositories, like going find that Docker, like copying and pasting this and modifying it is so much easier than going look up the Docker run and going to the proper, what's it called? The proper documentation on Microsoft's site. And so, yeah, I wanted to do this primarily for myself. But I'll take a quick look as I wrap up, and we'll see how much code is behind installing this, because it'll also give me a chance to explain. We'll look through another line of input. So we have install. So it's like, the SQL client, SQL package, etc. You could change the SA password. You can show the log if you want. And then here's the little runs. And I didn't highlight this earlier. This is what makes everything possible. This composite action is what allows you to use shell scripting within your GitHub Actions. And so here's our env that has the input. And yeah, this was actually pretty straightforward. So in this case, sorry. So in this case, and because we're PowerShell people, this is like the easiest way to actually pass in the parameters to main.ps1. Like before, you saw that I handled it in different ways. I would probably, I don't know if I needed to execute it 3 different times, because you can see here that it's all in one place. So we'll go, oh, check it out. I like this. Required false. So that's like mandatory is false. Mandatory up there. And then the default is dbatools. So you can have defaults just like with PowerShell. And this was just massive. Oh, you can even do the validate set because it's PowerShell. If somebody tries to pass in something crazy, it'll tell them. You can see the differences for installing on Mac is so drastically different from the way that you install it on Linux. Mac does not have a Docker engine, by the way, because there are licensing issues. At least whenever I checked, there were licensing issues. So you literally need to install Docker first and then go and get your containers and your images. So that's something that, yeah, I don't really use the GitHub runners for Mac OS that much because you just have to do more stuff for it. And here's Linux, a lot faster. And we could see this, that it's very similar to what we had found today. Here's the Docker run. Remember when we ran that? And then Windows. Oh, wow, yo. So with Windows, I was trying to just use a Docker container, and it took 16 minutes, and I thought that there was something wrong with Docker. And so I filed an issue, and they're like, that Docker image is 16 gigs, so it's not going to be fast ever. And so it ends up that if you want to install SQL Server on a Windows runner, it is so much faster to just install it from the command line. And that's what I did. And this was just like, it was really fun to learn all of these differences on how it behaves. And it's familiar. It's PowerShell. We know it. So that concludes my demo portion of this presentation. Are there any questions? Thank y'all for staying. Hey, did the co-presenter stay, or did he bail? The co-organizer.
What, the co-organizer?
I thought that was the first guy that you introduced me to. Whenever he was like,
No. That was the first guy. That was so that was the other guy that was also in the lobby with you. Simultaneously. Yeah.
Aha.
I think Thomas is there.
Co-organizer, and I'm still here.
Did that help you with what you'll need for the GitHub Actions?
A little bit. I didn't catch everything, and even I started drinking tequila now since 15 minutes or something like that.
Perfect.
So Chrissy, just for completeness, can you show us the process of creating a secret?
Yes, haha, thank you. And to answer the person who just asked if I have any plans on streaming on Twitch again, so far, yeah, I've been super tired and burnt out. And I consider it, but I actually don't even come up to my office. Whenever I get home, I still play on my laptop, but I do it downstairs watching reality TV. And it has been about a year since I streamed on Twitch. And I keep expecting that I'm going to, because this is like the longest break that I've ever taken. But I don't think that it'll happen for like another 6 months. So, I used to go out on vacation And I had, you know, and there was like all this vibrancy and it was fun. And then I'm just not finding the energy that I need to do it yet. But thank you for asking, and thank you for being interested. I loved it whenever I did it. I just, every time I imagine doing stuff, I'm like, oh, too tired.
Yeah, I enjoyed your streams too. They're really chilly, so.
Thank you. Yeah. So this is how we create a secret, and I appreciate that question. I'm gonna create it in my actions test. And then I'll go back and refer to the secrets within within one of the actions as well. So what you do is you go here. You can probably, I wonder, you could do this within the VS Code extension for GitHub and maybe with actions. But I found that it didn't work when I would like press enter, and I was like, I don't want to figure this out. So I am back to doing it on the web. So you can see these are all of the secrets that I created, and you can't view them, which is awesome because then you can't show all your API keys when you stream. You can only update or remove them. You could see that like I have a whole bunch of keys here, and there are different levels of secrets. There's repository, there's environment, I think there's organizational. And so far, I've only used repository secrets. So you just go there and you're like, my new secret. And then you can like type in some base 64 encoded binary stuff. And then you could like decode it, which is totally what I did. And I was so shocked and excited. I love that little trick that you could take text and then make it back into a binary. So you add your secret. And then within your action, let's see if we have any secrets already that we could copy paste. Awesome. Yeah, we'll do it here, right? So I'm going to paste the name of that secret, and I'll just do this, and then I'll do this like that, right? And it doesn't have to be the same name, but I like it. And then whenever you are in here, what I could do, because this is PowerShell. Wait, let's get to a little PowerShell step. This is during that step. Okay, so, and I'll show you something else about the steps too. 1, 2, copy paste, and then I would say my new secret right here. So you see this ENV, my new secret, and then another one, and then that is for, so this is, the secret is limited to just this step, but if you put it up here, so we'll X that out, we'll come up here, and if it's not included in an actual step, then this sets the variables to be used anywhere in this workflow.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, so you could go and it'll work right here, and then you could just copy and paste, you know, whatever. Let's see if there's some PowerShell down at the bottom. So even if you wanted to rewrite it right here, you could do that. You could use it anywhere. I used the anywhere for my GitHub token, my PAT, which is the personal access token that allows me to talk to different repositories. So because the dbatools repository is on the SQL Collaborative, and I need like my PAT to be able to interact with that. Sweet, awesome. I'm glad that you liked it, Joseph. Joe.
Yeah, perfect. So just for clearance, so you the env is the step for creating, I think, an environment variable on the container or on your machine, and then you access it with $env, so the normal PowerShell way to get to an environment variable, I think. Right.
Say it one more time.
So you created that that environment variable with your env : and then specified the name of the variable and the value for that. And if you try to access it inside of your container, for example, you just type the $env to access that environment variable.
So within the container, are you talking about my SQL Server container? Or are you talking about my GitHub Action Runner?
your SQL Server container, for example. So you write
That
that
is
env.
yeah, that's a really good question. I don't remember. I feel like I did this. I don't think that I go much into my container. However, if I would, what I would do is use like a bash step to, like, let's say that I needed to write something to my containers temp. And this might be what you're asking. Like, what I would do is I would use this step to say env license, and then I would say, like, I don't know the command, but let's just say docker write it's right, and then yeah, like this. There we go. Like it's probably something along the lines of that, or I would say it like this.
Okay.
Yeah, so I
Okay.
would use it. I always use it outside of the container, but I still can communicate to the container.
Okay. Okay.
I'll take that out just to make sure that it's not as confusing. But I don't know. Yeah, I think it's like docker exec and then probably echo something.
Now it makes sense. So you write something from outside into a file. Yeah, now
exactly. Yep. Because I did do that because that's how I first started, and I was like, why isn't it taking my license? And then I was like, oh, that's why, because I was like inception with the container, and I didn't need to be so deep. I had to just like do it in my runner instead of the container. But yeah, if you need it, just go from the outside and then to the inside. There we go. Thank you. I wonder if it'll copy paste. Let's try this. And you know what I would do right here? I would say right here, shell. Sometimes it's more helpful if you use shell bash. So let's do this purely in bash. Okay.
Yeah, this --env.
Oh, check that. Oh, I see what you did. So you're not writing a file, Falk. You are you're setting up that variable. That's really cool. And I saw one of the PowerShell actions was so awesome. GitHub actions marketplace, and it's going to be like there aren't any good matches. All right. So if we go here and we type in PowerShell, this one just came up, and I think that it'll be really interesting. It hydrates the context, so you could use $GitHub $job. So you could do $runner.os and actually see the OS. So as you start working more and more with runners, or sorry, with GitHub Actions, I think that this is going to come in very handy. So you have like GitHub Actions environmental variables. I can never spell environment right. Oh, context, that's what it was. Let me see right there. So it's really awesome that this person took all of this stuff and made it like $GitHub.object, probably not env, but like runner.object, etc., and made all of that available. There's more than this. Yeah, here we go. GitHub run ID. Oh my God, that would be so helpful. Let me make this bigger. So it can get a lot more powerful than what you've seen. But yeah, that would be $event_name. I think it's just such a really cool action. And the way that we would add it, I'm going to have to find it again, because I think I kind of flew over what it's like to add an action. I'm sorry. Y'all are probably like, just make a bookmark. I know. All right, so we're going to go here to PowerShell. And so all you would have to do to get this person's thing into is to copy this. So copy that. Oh, look, he has some outputs. I don't really know how to use it. Never mind. Results under the result key. Yeah, I don't know. Thought it was going to be more straightforward. There we go. Maybe it's here. Nope, I still don't know. I'm so sorry.
No problem. No worries.
Hold on. I feel like maybe this one, because here's some PowerShell, right? Like I want like $GitHub. Oh, here it is. Okay, so there we go. So this is actually super duper useful, because if we don't do $GitHub within PowerShell and use this action, then we would actually need to do, I'm just going to use my bar at the top. We would have to do like this, like $, this, like that. Like that's what we'd have to do within our PowerShell script, and it's just not as easy. Sorry, you take this off. That'd be a lot harder. I like this a lot. I'll be using. That's what I got. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for presenting. Really cool presentation. Do you have any questions for Chrissy? Okay. So if we do not have any questions, then
my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for presenting. I think we can end it now because we are already 7 minutes over time. So.
Oh, awesome! And I'm going to change all of my keys. So y'all have a great night. That's what I'll be doing for like the next 20 minutes. So have a great one. Talk to y'all later.
Yeah, thank you. Bye bye. See you all. Thank you.